It's hard. Just go. my life is a beautiful madness. You could stay fast or you could stay static. Speedrun ever clear and crack like a real man. Oh yeah. This guy's a genius.
Nico would be put in a strange situation. Nico would be put in a strange situation, this being having to kill one brother after both brothers would ask him to kill each other. The sad part about the McCurry family is that they're all hypocrites, but they're all right about each other. Even before this, Francis is like any other McCurry brother. The only thing that separated him is that he became a police officer. All of his brothers would despise him for the fact he did something different on top of him being a dirty cop. They look at Francis as a hypocrite due to this. The only person in his family that he communicates with is his mother, being that she's blind of Francis' doings. Being a part of the LCPD will become his identity. He will have Nico do things to protect his reputation and influence. With his identity being his career, we see how he takes his way of living seriously.
It's got but one stain on my character, and I'm finished. I want to make things a bit better, by any means necessary.
Isn't that police work?
Sure. And the moon is made of cheese, and the streets is paved with gold. Wake up!
With Francis, the things he had Nico do is strictly business. He had info on Nico blackmailing him for the things he needed done. That simple. Derek, on the other hand, had a lengthy rap sheet. With him being the oldest in the family, he would pave the way for his brothers as far as them becoming involved in the criminal underworld. He would become an informant, leading into someone he ran with going into prison. Doing time in prison himself, he would become addicted to heroin. Later, he would move to Ireland, being that his family is of course Irish. He will also fight in the war during his stay, similar to Nico. Francis and the rest of his family lost respect for Derek a long time ago. At this point, his identity is everything he did in the past. Derek will return back to Liberty City to partake in robbing a bank. They will take Francis a while to learn that Derek is back, but here we see how his younger brother's respect toward Derek is before and during the robbery.
Derek, did you sort out the charge for the vault door?
What's that mean? Of course I sorted out the charge. What do you think I've been doing all day?
I don't know. Nodding off with a needle sticking out of your arm?
Patrick, you were such a sweet little boy when I left this city.
You was gone a long time, Derek. From what I remember, you've changed too.
I'm trying to be honest with these people. We put them through a lot today.
Fuck these people, fuck your cause, that shit's over. Fuck you, take the needle out your arm, then tell me what to do.
Nico will help him out with what he wants, and that's being killing his old crew. With his identity being the past, we see how he takes this serious.
What do you care about?
I care about getting people back who claimed I was a grass. People who used that to steal shit off me.
Unlike Francis, Nico will be tied in on Derek's doings at this point.
About getting people back who claimed I was a grass. People who used that to steal shit off me.
Unlike Francis, Nico will be tied in on Derek's doings at this point, with him even lying about him snitching on his old crew. Nico will sympathize with Derek, but Derek's not telling the truth about anything apart from the obvious.
Me, Bucky, and Aiden, we all cared about the same stuff. We came together for a cause we believed in. At least, I thought I believed in it. I was young.
This was a while ago then.
Yeah, so Aiden got caught with something when he was somewhere he wasn't meant to be. Needless to say, he'll be inside for a time. Him and Bucky think I talk. Couldn't see no other way how he got caught. From what I hear, Aiden still rants about me to anyone who'll listen.
I know how it feels to be betrayed.
You got that look about you.
He would even have Nico drive a boat with him so he can get money for his heroin addiction. So when it's ambushed, Derek is so disordered he thinks Francis has something to do with this.
I didn't think he even knew I was back. Can't the man just let his brother be? It's like fucking Cain and Abel, the two of us. No wonder I turned into the wreck you see before you. A brother like that. Jesus.
So is Francis the only explanation for this shit?
If the shoe fits, Nico. If the bloody shoe fits. Sure, I've been telling a few people about this. But hell, I smell a rat, and Frankie's the biggest damn rat I know.
Nico will later find out about Derek snitching. Nico will be in shock, but now he will know the truth.
I'm not sure, but it didn't do him much good either way. I think it was because of Derek. Because Derek was a grass in England. He was involved in that business and he grassed on some people to avoid doing some serious time. And then went into hiding for years.
I did not know that.
No, he spun it different, but that was the truth. A grass to avoid doing time. That's why Jerry won't bend. He sees it as penance for the sins of his brother.
After this, he will kill the last person Derek is worrying about. Although Nico knows the truth, he still does this because he genuinely feels bad for Derek.
Please, Nico, boy. Just this last one. Please.
Sure, Derek.
You and me. The same. The same. The same.
Francis would then find out that Derek is back to when he has Nico meet him. Francis will start to panic, being that he's worried Derek would expose him after he threatened to do so.
It wasn't bad enough having a bunch of crooks for brothers. Now I've got him threatening to talk to a journalist about his family, about me.
Well, tell him to be quiet.
I am trying to become the commissioner of police. I'd be a laughingstock. Cop with the famous snitching traitor for a brother. Ah, you stop it.
Stop.
Stop.
Kill your brother.
Just put him out of his misery.
Fuck you.
No, fuck you, pal. I'm gonna meet him in the Courtyard Park off Bismarck and Lancet. Deal with him. Make him a tragedy, not a disaster.
Derek will call Nico to have him kill Francis, but he's the one chosen to die. Killing Derek will put him out of his misery.
What's this about? I've got to say, I'm nervous about this little meeting.
Shit, when I heard you was back, I nearly shat myself. Sit down. Why didn't you call me? You could have slept on my couch. I'm doing real well for myself, real well. I'm sorry about how life turned out for you.
Just a second here, Derek. I gotta speak to one of the sergeants. Hey, what's the problem? I thought you were gonna make something happen for me.
I'm not so sure about it.
What's gonna make you sure? You want me to give you a raise?
That might help.
All right then. Call it a bonus. Make this happen.
being blackmailed, Nico would use Francis for a while, something Francis didn't have a choice in.
I did what you wanted me to do. I killed your brother. You and me are over. At least Jerry and Packy are honest about what they do. You're a crook, hiding behind his badge and the reputation. You know what, Frankie boy? I'm going to use that. I ever feel the heat on me, I'll call you, and you're going to make shit go away. That cool?
Sounds like I don't have a choice.
After this, Nico will attend his funeral. We will then see how the rest of the McCreary family feel.
I'm, sorry for your loss.
I'm not. I'm sorry for Ma. I gave up on my brothers a long time ago.
Maybe bad shit just happens when you got a family made up of dirty cops and smackheads, gangsters, and petty hoods.
Of course, they're sad with Derek being killed, but they all felt deep down that it was for the best. The only thing Francis had to live for was his badge. He wouldn't be respected outside of his family or have nothing without it. Willing to do anything to keep it. He definitely isn't the good guy in this, but he still has ambition in his career, dirty or not. Derek somewhat already lived his life and stayed in the past. The only thing he would look forward to was getting hot. At this point, we all know Nico's hates to be lied to, which makes this more of a reason to kill him, on top of pitting him out of his misery. This is why sparing Francis instead of Derek is the better choice.
Hey there, Brian.
Hi, Joe. Hey, Bonnie making chicken marsala tonight?
Oh, she made that 3 nights ago. Wow, that's some nose you got.
Yeah, one time it almost got me a spokesman deal.
Follow you. You know, we could use a nose like that down at the precinct.
Really?
sure many of you have seen this meme of Peter Griffin relaxing on his couch where he contemplates, quote, man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. The meme is then usually paired with a news article of sorts that shows some terrifying development in the field of science, suggesting that the meme's creator isn't a fan of the potential implications of this new breakthrough. I've seen quite a few of these memes, and they kind of got me thinking about the subject. One thing led to another, and I did what a typical garbage YouTuber does, and turned it into an iceberg chart. Today, we're going to be covering my homemade man-made horrors iceberg. I thought this iceberg was a pretty good topic to work with because there aren't a ton of entries here, but each of them spark pretty interesting discussions about how we interact with the technology that we ourselves create. For this reason, basically every entry on this iceberg is going to fit into one of two categories. Existing consequences due to problems we've created, or technologies that we're seeing the advent of fit into dystopian themes in some way. So we aren't going to talk about, like, mustard gas. That's horrifying, but it doesn't really fit into this category. I want to talk about things we see worked on today that, if left unchecked, could have disastrous consequences for the entirety of the human race. Whether by annihilating us or completely changing our way of life, or culture and society as a whole, potentially beyond any degree of present recognition. Some of these, however, are also just things that we associate with the meme. I'm no philosopher, and I won't be able to attribute immaculate commentary or consequences with every entry, so to some degree this stuff here is just for fun. With that said, I'll waste no more time talking, though I will briefly ask that if you enjoy this video, if you'd consider subscribing to the channel so that I can pursue my goal of hitting 100,000 subs before the end of 2024. If you like this video, there's plenty more on my channel that you'd enjoy as well, and I can guarantee that there's some future content that you'll also like. Now, let's dive into this iceberg with our very first tier. Boston Dynamics. Boston Dynamics is a robotics company founded in 1992, which designs robots that can be used for a wide array of tasks. And they've caught a lot of attention recently for their extremely impressive developments with robots like Spot or Atlas, essentially with regards to how well they can navigate a complex environment and even correct their movements in accordance with the space around them. These robots boast incredible feats, and when viewed through a positive lens, are incredible achievements in engineering. There's no doubt in my mind that these creations, and also similar ones, this company isn't, I'm not gatekeeping this to Boston Dynamics specifically, there's no doubt that these robots will be able to accomplish work that's too monotonous or dangerous for humans to perform. The issue at play here, however, is how easy it might be for these robots to be used in combat situations with an unparalleled efficiency. We've watched the work of Boston Dynamics pay off in our lifetimes. I literally remember seeing videos of Atlas at different stages in development multiple times when I was younger, and in just a decade their technology looks worlds apart from their earlier iterations. It's not unreasonable to believe that if forces wanted to use these for combat purposes, they absolutely could, and they could do so with terrifying efficiency. As amazing as it might be to take humans out of war zones, there's something terrifying about letting a robotic husk make the decision to kill someone. Now, it's not like we haven't been distancing ourselves from killing for as long as warfare has existed. We went from swords to bows, and then we went from bomber planes to remote-operated aircraft. Moving away from the killing isn't a new thing in human warfare, but these robots feel like a giant step. Perhaps the biggest one we've taken yet, justifiably adding them to this list of man-made horrors. Data collection. This entry is extremely broad, yet appropriately so. I'm not going to sit here and dig into what Meta or TikTok does specifically, or try to tell you which platforms or devices are better or worse, but the fact of the matter is, literally everyone is stealing your fucking data. Your phone, your appliances, your car, your doorbell, your Roomba. We've seen a drastic, exponential change in what products can record things about you and give them to their parent company who just sells it to someone else. The implications aren't always sinister, but they can be, and the fact of the matter is, we may have created a system where in 50 years' time, every single thing you can touch is looking at you, seeking out anything to exploit from your behavior or your characteristics to make money off of you. Who knows, maybe one day your couch will sniff the crumbs that you leave on it so they can target you with Cheeto ads. Robots with brains. Very broadly speaking, this entry is referring to the many articles and developments happening recently involving the creation of artificial neurons. And, beyond that, the implementation of these artificial neurons into robots, if you can even call them robots at this point. If we keep developing artificial neurons, we may get to a point where it's more efficient to have these pseudo-organisms operating machinery than computers, perhaps. What would that mean for those little brains? What even are they? How complex could they get? We'll be diving into some more specifics with regards to this kind of thing deeper on in the iceberg. Neuralink. You've probably heard of Elon Musk's latest project in the news, that being Neuralink. I'm not the best to talk about all the possible issues that could arise from technology like this, but an implant in your brain to control devices simply out of convenience could be a step too far. Now, there are things that are objectively amazing about this technology. There are going to be people with disabilities that can get some function back, or maybe even become capable of things entirely new for them. Some devices require quick thinking and might be used more efficiently. But what happens when the person you trust to put a second brain inside your head ends up being a bad actor? What happens when every single job requires you to install one of these in your head and it ceases to be your choice? Let's say, somewhere down the line, we take a critical job like air traffic control and implement technology like this, so ATC workers can communicate more efficiently and make air travel safer. Well, what if that produces results so good that more and more industries follow, and eventually we get to the point where companies won't hire you if you don't have something like this installed and don't know how to use it? Clearly, in all likelihood, we probably won't be forced to install this kind of thing. But what if we're strong-armed into it out of convenience that bleeds into necessity? You can make the argument that this happened with cell phones or credit cards, and you basically need one to live in a lot of places. Modern housing solutions. We have a lot of people that we need to house. That's kind of a problem. The American housing economy is absolute booty cheeks right now, and I'm sure that's the same for a lot of places around the world. Rising rent costs have led people to live in tiny homes, and that's cool and all for a starter home, but it also sets a terrifying precedent. I'm not here to have a conversation on housing in general. That's a giant debate, and I'm not qualified to have it. This isn't about 15-minute cities or anything like that either, and I'm not here to debate whether or not urban sprawl is bad. What I'm here to say is that I think it's reasonable to suggest that tiny housing, or getting used to having no space, will be shoved down our throats by people for their convenience. We may live to see a cultural revolution in terms of housing, where people learn to expect and even work for a box that's 10 feet across to live in. I'm not entirely a shill for this post-war American urban sprawl. I'm not going to act like this is perfect, but I'm also not going to act like I want to work a 9 to 5 and come back to this tiny home. If it's a stepping stone for some people, awesome. And it could be a good solution to homelessness, if, of course, paired with the other treatments that those people would require. But it can't be a permanent thing for everyone. I just think we should be decently wary about these kinds of neighborhoods. Subscriptions, financing, and surge pricing. This entry is another broad one, but I want to take a second to talk about how we're moving towards extremely predatory transaction plans. I mean, we live in an age where you're encouraged to finance your fucking pizza. Everything is becoming subscription-based. Sometimes it's convenient, and other times it's dystopian garbage. Surge pricing. Wendy's just announced they may experiment with changing the price of a burger based on the time of day and other factors. Imagine a world where you try to go into a store and buy a cold glass of lemonade on a summer day, and the cashier looks you dead in the eyes and goes, it's 80 degrees out, it's noon, and you're sweaty, so this is going to be $12.99. Now, I'm not going to sit here and analyze these things from like a financial perspective. I just want to take a second to point out that we're moving away from being able to buy things traditionally, and thus we're losing control over them. We thought subscriptions were convenient at first, but the day we have to subscribe to literally everything will be a terrible awakening. Deepfakes. A lot of AI content will be discussed on today's iceberg, as you can probably imagine. Deepfakes in particular are of great concern. Not just for, what you're probably thinking about, but imagine not being able to trust any video. That's what I'm concerned with here. Falsified evidence with deepfaked materials presented in court, fake speeches from our leaders inciting violence, whatever it may be. There is going to come a time where deepfake videos are so realistic that they're a genuine problem. I can't say where that line is specifically, but I would hope you'd agree with me that that's true.
I just dropped like a 150 milligram edible, and I'm feeling fucking zooted. Honestly, I'm feeling on the top floor right now. I'm about to design like 30 new fucking space cars and get us to Mars.
Virtual reality for animals. Something I've seen here and there, albeit with slight variations, is the use of virtual reality to ease the minds of livestock. I think there's a beautiful irony in this situation. It's actually almost funny. How weird does it look to see a cow in a giant factory being stuffed with garbage and led to its slaughter, wearing VR goggles to pretend he's in a pretty field in Scotland? One could argue this is emblematic of many situations that humans find themselves in, being fed fantasies that can't be lived, but can be experienced in part, to make us comfortable as we're fed to the slaughter. I feel like at this stage this isn't terrible, but I don't know, it's just a weird thing to see a cow wearing a VR headset. Just think about it for a sec. AI Church. This entry is referring specifically to one article that I found out of Germany, where Jonas Simmerlein, a German philosopher and theologian, combined several AI-related tools, mostly just chatbots, and organized them into a sermon made mostly from AI. Basically, Protestant Christians watch this event, which, in my opinion, is more of an art spectacle than anything, where these chatbots delivered extremely deadpan statements about faith, really not saying anything meaningful. The chatbots urged the audience to keep having faith, understand that now is the time, and to not fear death. These claims don't really have any theological basis and just seem like, well, exactly what you'd expect out of ChatGPT if you asked it to produce a sermon. If actually injected with theological knowledge, it might make sense rhetorically, but overall it was just weird. The reason this is on the list is because, like everything with AI, it may be crawling now, but it'll run soon. And there are plenty of people out there, as history has demonstrated, who can be taken advantage of by religious rhetoric. It's an extremely powerful tool of manipulation, explaining why seemingly normal people can join cults and devote themselves to meaningless garbage. Why then is it a good idea to render this power to an AI? At best, people would use this tool to boast their ability to control people, and at worst, the AI would just do it itself. It's kind of a weird thing that I'm not particularly excited about existing, I suppose. Awful urban development. This is kind of a sidestep of our modern housing solutions entry, but this one's kind of presented as a critique of modern city planning. What I'm referring to right now are these concrete behemoths, giant roundabouts or highway exchanges that are being implemented as driving demands increase. I put this on here not because they're a problem now necessarily, but just because I think it's funny how much these things have compounded and grown over the years, and I only wonder how big they'll actually get. Again, not the most giant problem right now, but I really want to be able to drive my car without having to think of 100 different places to get off at an exit or having 80 people on top of or below me. Future animal farming. I'ma just say it, I love to eat meat. I have no plans of being vegan, ever. Eating animals is tied to human society and culture, and it has been for literally thousands of years. We shouldn't stop doing it. But we can recognize that it's getting less and less sustainable, and that factory farms are absolutely terrible and disgusting. I'm personally not opposed to lab-grown meat just on the supposition that it's not natural. I mean, if it works and it tastes the same, I really don't care. But what I'm concerned with regarding this entry is these abominations. Parts of an animal grown just for food, growing only the edible parts of a chicken for efficiency's sake. If this works, great, but I just feel like something's wrong about it. I mean, imagine if these things experience some sort of consciousness. Imagine seeing these abhorrent creations at the same scale as animals in factory farms now. Thousands and thousands of chickens processed every day, being born into this shell with no eyes or mouth, only to be raised, killed, and processed. This isn't something that's terrifying if it's just used for food, but I just don't know how I feel about the idea of being able to grow specific parts of animals. It just feels really weird. Space advertising. Ever seen this photo right here? Imagine you're looking out at the night sky where you should be treated to a beautiful expanse of stars and other celestial bodies shining across your vision. And then you see a fucking can of Pepsi. Right now I'm talking about billboards in space. The feasibility of something like this is growing. It's not a technological dream anymore. This could actually happen. And while generally there are light pollution laws and stuff like that, don't be surprised when companies who bankroll Congress lobby to get this kind of thing done. I could very much see the argument being made that in places like large cities, which already have enough light pollution to block out the night sky, that there's nothing to conserve, and therefore you should be allowed to have this type of advertising in dense urban areas. Again, I think we'd be repulsed by it today, but if you give society enough time and watch as nearly every ounce of space that exists becomes infested with advertising, that this could actually happen. Metaverse vacations. Recently, there's been a body of news articles being written which suggest that metaverse vacations could be a thing soon enough. This, to me, is a major red flag. To me, I see these articles as the beginning steps of desensitization to how awful this idea is. and how it's conditioning an audience of people that looking at something through a VR headset is going to actually replicate a family vacation. I mean, this should offend you if you can't afford to see the pyramids, for example. It's companies like Meta outright saying, don't worry that you can't actually travel, you're stupid enough that looking at a picture of this thing is the same thing. You're taking something as fun as a vacation, where you can take an adventure and surround yourself with a new culture and bastardizing it into yet another spoon-fed pleasure fest from your living room. You won't try the food, you won't meet the people, you won't be there. If we actually start parading this around as a legitimate thing, it's a sign that we're yet again forgetting the human. I really hope this idea never takes off in any meaningful way. Dead internet. You've likely heard of the dead internet theory, which is becoming more and more of a reality each day. Our AI technology is making it more and more possible that literally everything on the internet, sometimes being claimed as human-made, is just coming from bot traffic and AI-generated stuff. It would mean that something as cool as the internet, which can be used for fostering communities and preserving culture, would just be a cesspool of AI garbage, recycling the same opinions and eliminating discourse. Something I find absolutely hilarious that I had to put into this video somewhere was that when I started researching this meme, I was looking for examples of this meme being used so I could, take those man-made horrors and research them. And what I started to find on Google image search was this. Look at this garbage. What's wrong with it? Well, it's AI generated. It doesn't make sense. It physically resembles this meme, but thematically these photos are empty. There's literally AI content of this meme being generated. That's the most ironic thing I've ever heard. Worm brain. OpenWorm is a company dedicated to digitally replicating a worm down to every last neuron. They're up to a pretty good start. You can go look at their virtual C. elegans worm on their website and play around with it. This is just a fun diagram, you might say, but then they actually coded accurate worm behavior into a Lego robot. Having a project this advanced and then just stuffing it into a Lego Mindstorms bot is hilarious to me. Anyways, the project is still going, but it's wild to think that even with relatively not complex organisms, we could hypothetically discover all of the synaptic weights in their brains and fully remake it digitally. Imagine if we could just make animals. That's insane. Eater. Eater, or Energetically Autonomous Tactical Robot, is a project created by Robotic Technology Incorporated, incredible name, by the way, alongside Cyclone Power Technologies to demonstrate how a robot could fuel itself with biomass, which would mean that, theoretically, under the right conditions, it could operate indefinitely. This concept is really cool and maybe could provide itself useful in certain situations. But pivoting away from the idea of it being able to fuel itself and looking what it actually feeds off of, biomass. There was a great conspiracy when this came out that these could somehow be able to eat humans, which this clearly isn't designed to do. Although according to the creators of Eater, it is able to consume chicken. So, I don't know, do with that information what you will. Dead spider robots. This entry refers to a development in necrobots hailing from Rice University, where scientists, for some reason, were able to robotically reanimate the corpse of spiders to make them into claw machines, just like those ones at the arcade. Anyways, in the paper published by these researchers in a journal called Advanced Science, they suggested that this paved the way for making, quote, biodegradable grippers for small objects. The lead researcher here made a pretty good point. People may be put off by the dead spider, but from an engineering standpoint, spiders function in a fascinating way. The researchers showed how to manipulate the hydraulic system that spiders use in a couple of trials I'm showing now. Perhaps most fascinatingly, the spiders were able to perform the gripping task upwards of 100 times, lifting around 130% of their body weight. There was a really interesting speculation here that these tools could be used to remove insects for study without damaging a microecosystem. I think this entry is actually the opposite of a lot that I've put on here today. It's something that looks terrifying and strange, but is actually relatively harmless and may actually have some good uses. But then again, going back to the outside, learning how to manipulate dead bodies is strange. And like a lot of entries in this iceberg, the thought of making the animal to human jump is just terrifying. I guess all we could do is hope that that doesn't happen. Digital necromancy. Digital necromancy, broadly, is the idea of combining any sort of technology, frequently incorporating artificial intelligence, to produce the husk of a loved one who's passed away. Creators of these imitations of humans can then work through grief with that person, or otherwise experience whatever else they wanted to do with that person. Now, this could be useful in some limited applications. In limited doses, it might help people work through grief. It might be useful for people with disabilities or the elderly who can't understand their loss and could seek comfort from this type of technology. The thing is, though, knowing people, they'd get carried away. When this technology gets to be good, like really good, which it will, we'll be able to create a simulation of a person that can replicate answers in the exact same way that the dead person would have. And I think it would end up being extremely detrimental for the grief process, denying people an actual opportunity to let go, and probably even worsening psychological problems instead of making them better. Also, take a second and think about this being used for notorious purposes. If we can make this technology work positively, we can make it work negatively. Imagine someone manipulating your person into telling you horrible things. Imagine you're being tortured and someone brings back your dead wife just to tell you that she's leaving you. It seems like something the human brain shouldn't have to experience. Mammalian virgin births. Parthenogenesis, or literally virgin birth, is exactly what it sounds like. It's something that can happen when a female animal can't find a mate or is otherwise extremely stressed, and it's seen in animals like kimono dragons, for example. Now, the thing about parthenogenesis is it doesn't work in mammals. That was until recently, when it was achieved in a lab for the first time using mice, and it actually worked fairly well, with one of the mice making it all the way into adulthood. One of the scientists behind this breakthrough explained that under normal circumstances, this type of thing is impossible for mammals due to how genomic imprinting works. But with some epigenetic rewriting, they were able to get around these natural barriers. I thought this was a good example of something to put on the list because, while at first it just seems like another biological innovation, I tend to think that these efforts which reach into creating life unnaturally can be, well, terrifying. I've laid out some of the implications of it throughout this video, but you can also make the general point that this could one day happen to humans. And if so, what would the consequences be? There's an interesting example of that nearly happening way back in 1995, where a boy in the UK grew up with a very asymmetrical face. His mother had him examined, and lo and behold, he had nearly 0 instances of paternal DNA. He's the closest thing to an asexual human reproduction ever recorded. The boy, known anonymously as FD, did have some minor learning difficulties, but was generally healthy. But this goes to show that someone could survive off this type of genetic makeup if this were to happen to humans. One day we could be doing this thing with people, and though I can't quite explain why, it doesn't sit well with me. Prison sentence drugs. This entry refers to a fairly old concept which has been brought up here and there, hinting at the idea that a prisoner could experience a long prison sentence via drug induction, without actually jailing them for an oppressive period of time. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I can throw out there the very basic detail that time manipulation in one's brain generally has to do with the neurotransmitter GABA and also attention and emotion. And in general, these variables get super complicated and make it appear, to me at least, that there's no path forward to actually make this idea happen. That said, that doesn't eliminate this idea as a threat to civil liberties. One person really advocating for this is a philosopher at Oxford University named Rebecca Roach, who's written a bunch of literature, such as a paper called Cyborg Justice, Punishment in the Age of Transformative Technology, taking the position that some crimes are just too heinous for large prison sentences of, say, 30 years to atone for, and that instead we should be using drugs to make prisoners live out 1,000-year sentences. This is generally accepted to be, well, problematic, and I'd say this would never make its way past the 8th Amendment, in my country at least. But just because this idea can't exist perfectly doesn't mean it might not sneak up on us. It might start small, with drugs designed to make one uncomfortable or something. If this ever were to come to pass, as apparently some people do want it to, and as neuroscience develops further and farther, it would certainly qualify as a man-made horror. Gorilla videos. Okay, this entry has nothing to do with videos of gorillas. It's just kind of a point I wanted to make about online content and attention spans and whatnot. I don't know, I just felt like it made sense here. A bunch of zoos, such as the Toronto Zoo, have had to come out and ask people to stop showing gorillas content on their phones, because it upsets them. It modifies their behavior and makes them less social, mostly due to the fact that they'll stop interacting with those around them just to sit there and watch the videos. It's kind of a meta thing, I guess, and points out quite hilariously that maybe phone content is getting a bit addicting. I'm not going to turn this into a drag on social media, but I will point out that I think short form content is a big problem for our attention spans and how we interact with others, and, well, so do some zoo curators apparently. Meat grown from human tissue samples. Like I said earlier, I have no problem with the very, very general idea of eating lab-grown meat. If it tastes the same, reduces animal cruelty, is cheaper and better for the environment, and can sustain the same cultural and social norms that regular food does, great. However, I think one might agree that this isn't necessarily the way this technology will be implemented. One slight thing I wanted to mention in this entry is that Bite Labs tried to, back in 2014, create meat like this infused with the DNA of celebrities. Not much has come out of this company since then. I think they aren't around anymore, but this picture really made the rounds back in the day and was super popular with this meme. To be honest, I know for a fact that people would buy this. It's definitely baby steps on the way to just like straight up cannibalism, and I'd really prefer that this just didn't exist. Transplanting memories. Being able to transplant a memory into someone would be pretty freaking insane. The idea that you could genuinely make someone think something happened which didn't could have crazy ramifications. You can manipulate politics, corporations, religions, you could create sleeper agents, or totally upend someone's philosophy and sense of self. So, is that actually feasible? Well, there are generally two ideas of making this happen, either by genuinely chemically planting a memory inside someone's head or inducing it psychologically. The latter has been done frequently, by manipulating details, pain, using leading questions, and other forms of communication. You could pretty reliably make someone believe in something that didn't happen. But what I'm asking is, could you actually plant like an MP4 file in someone's head? Hopefully not, but we're working on it. Just a few years back, scientists were able to demonstrate the most basic instance of transplanting memories by making a non-conditioned snail behave like a conditioned one, after taking RNA from inside the latter and giving it to the former. Here's a more detailed explanation. Scientists condition snails to react much quicker by shocking them. It's a process that produces a fairly reliable result. You shock the snail, and over time it gets jumpy and stays jumpy for a while. They did this, then removed DNA from that snail and put it into one that hadn't been conditioned at all, and that new snail ended up displaying the conditioned behavior. So essentially, this quote-unquote memory is just a relic of very basic conditioning. The snail ingested this memory and modified its behavior accordingly. If that were to make the animal human jump, we would be in gigantic trouble. It's a terrifying precedent. Productive dreams. Throughout this iceberg, we're digging into this vein of corporations seizing every dollar from you that they can and sucking the pleasure out of their lives while maximizing productivity, and this is a great example of that. This idea has been put out by some and is actually being looked into by a startup called Prophetic. It suggests that one could lucid dream and then work in their sleep. Lucid dreaming is fun, I'm sure, but imagine a work culture which encouraged or pushed having to get things done while you're literally sleeping. A world where sleep literally cannot be a reprieve from working, as it has been for all of human history. The idea that anyone would want this is insane to me. I guess in a perfect world where I could get the physical benefits of sleep and still, like, do my thing, I'd take it, but the idea that a corporate culture could be in control of that sounds terrible. The workday would just double. Will this happen? Probably not. But I can tell you right now that if I get a Teams notification at 2 a.m. and I have to pause my slumber to answer an email in the middle of my sleep, then I'm going to build my very own cabin in the woods, if you know what I mean. Virtual children. Combining our discussions about AI and going down a similar path as the entry regarding simulating dead people, consider having virtual children. A new idea that's been suggested with regards to where AI might be heading is this idea of giving people fake kids to raise that actually learn and grow up like real ones but are powered by artificial intelligence. Could that be fun? Sure. Would it beat having to carry around a baby doll for your high school sociology class? Maybe. Could it be used as population control by the government? Probably. It sounds like it has the potential to be manipulated, and it just feels really wrong to me. You shouldn't be robbed of authentic experiences just because AI can do them the same way or even better. It takes the human out of living life and should be avoided as much as possible. I don't see a world where virtual children would ever be necessary. plastic in my blood. Did you know that you probably have microplastic in your blood? I'm serious. Your blood, your bowels, your heart all probably have plastic in them. At least, scientists have found examples of people with this, and in one study, every artery studied had at least some. I'm not going to preach about littering. I would hope you don't do that, but we are reaching an endgame when it comes to plastic pollution. If this does result in public health crises, which it probably will, everyone could fall victim to it. To some extent, all of these sci-fi ideas I've brought up pale in comparison to how terrifying the amount of plastic garbage we generate every year is. So yeah, remember that every time you use some plastic unnecessarily, it is crawling around inside of you, so it probably got the last laugh. The ocean is on fire. This entry refers to a few incidents of the ocean lighting on fire from gas pipeline bursts, and it's more a way to open the door of discussion into us not caring for the environment, like, at all. I think the ocean being on fire is a perfect irony for, I don't know, maybe just not dumping garbage and oil and all this shit into the planet. I'm not the right person to make an eloquent commentary on this, but it did just terrify me. Monetize everything. We are approaching a world where it costs money to do literally anything. Every game you play has microtransactions. Every app you use for the most basic features costs money. If you want your $60,000 BMW to warm your ass cheeks on a dreary winter night, you'll need to pay a subscription for it. This is another much more philosophical entry, and though this doesn't pose bodily danger, I find it no less terrifying to imagine a world where it costs money not just to survive, but merely to exist in any given space at any given time, and partake in literally any convenience. You will own nothing and be happy. We've talked about subscriptions and problematic purchasing models, but at least those things are pumped out by companies. Companies that can be boycotted and flamed on social media and whose ways can be changed. This phrase that I'm talking about is pretty famous, coming from a World Economic Forum video, originating from a Dutch economist's essay, which basically suggests that in the future, everything will be shared services. There's no clear, obvious framework for this, but it's just reflecting the idea that we're owning less and less. Maybe your clothes will be a subscription service. Everything will be shared, maybe provided by the government, maybe by powerful companies, who knows and who cares. It's a dystopian thing to see just how excited these wealthy economists and politicians are about this, because you just know this is only going to be something that affects the middle and lower classes. There are some places that this kind of could work in small quantities, but what this concept could lead to if fully implemented is extremely disastrous. Torment Nexus. Ending off this video, we have a phrase that's really guided my entire point today. The Torment Nexus isn't one thing. It's the concept of humans creating something they know is objectively dystopian and scary, but makes money, or satisfies curiosity, or whatnot. The term originated from this tweet, which basically poked fun at the habit of people to create things that have been frequently warned against in science fiction, or other works of art which try and warn us of scary things. Plenty of things on this list have been prophesized by artists and writers, and when they came out, people frequently recognized that these things were scary and could lead to bad consequences. But here we are, making virtual reality systems integrated into our brains, or extremely powerful AI technology, or whatever it might be. Our ability to ignore our own warnings is nothing but a classic and excessively human thing, and I find it hilarious in a terrifying way. So, to conclude this video, try not to create the Torment Nexus. And don't support the people who inevitably will. Okay guys, I had a ton of fun making this quick video. It was a strange leap into crazy ideas. Crazy sometimes in the sense that they're so outlandish, but also crazy in the sense that they seem so destructive and problematic that I can't fathom their existence, and yet I have to, because they're coming. Like I said, I'm not a philosopher, so I won't conclude this video in any wise manner. I just wanted to take a minute to entertain y'all and point your heads in a certain direction. Do with that information whatever you want. Now, at this point, I'd love to say thank you for watching my video. I really hope you enjoyed your visit, and if you'd like to stay, you can do so by hitting the subscribe button to help me get to 100,000 subs by the end of 2024. If you really enjoyed it, I'd also like to point you in the direction of our Discord server, the link to which is in the description, where we talk about videos and potential topics. There's also an experimental Spanish channel where I'll occasionally post videos if you prefer watching in Spanish. Finally, I want to point out that if you're so kind, you can join the Seed Butter Patreon, where just $1 a month will grant you a thank you in every single video, and allow me to spend more time focusing on making content. Thank you all for your time, and have a wonderful night. See y'all soon.
Hi, Mama. I love you, sweet Mama. Good night.